I'm giving our house to my brother's family. If you refuse, we're getting divorced. Leave immediately. Kevin, my husband's brother, recently retired. Now living on a pension, he's realized how wasteful it is to keep paying rent. Out of the blue, my husband Jack decided to give our house to Kevin's wife, Linda. Jack agreed with her, and to top it off, hurled some harsh words at me. What on earth are these two thinking? But this house was my inheritance. When I reminded Jack of that, he looked genuinely shocked and muttered, "Huh." Had he forgotten? I had enough of him, so I decided to throw him out. My name is Catherine Hope. I'm 45 years old and have been married to Jack for over 20 years. We've never had children and we didn't pursue any fertility treatments, so it's just been the two of us. Jack was my boss when I was working, and back then he was someone I could rely on. When I was very young, I lost my parents in an accident and was raised by my grandparents. My grandfather was strict but kind, and my grandmother was gentle and always there for me. Their love and support carried me through life. When I became an adult and started working, I made sure to take good care of them in return. I treated them to trips, took them out for meals. We created wonderful memories together. Then suddenly, my grandmother fell ill and was hospitalized. She was diagnosed with lung cancer and soon passed away. My grandfather and I grieved deeply. I wished for him to live as long as possible, but the following year, he had a stroke and passed away, as if following my grandmother. One tragedy after another left me shattered. During this dark time, Jack was there for me. He encouraged me, often inviting me out to dinner when he noticed I was down at work. I was drawn to him, and eventually, we got engaged. That was the beginning of our marriage. I quit my job because Jack wanted me to and became a housewife. After our marriage, Jack became more controlling. This seemed to be influenced by his older brother, Kevin, who was much older. Kevin's wife, Linda, was completely devoted to him. Jack seemed to admire this dynamic and wanted me to be just like Linda. I didn't question Jack's wishes. Kevin was a respectable man who always showed appreciation for his wife. I supported Jack wholeheartedly, hoping he would become that way too. On the surface, Linda appeared to be a devoted wife who tirelessly supported Kevin. However, I never got along with her. Linda saw me as competition and often tried to provoke me into making mistakes. Jack, under Linda's spell, began comparing me to her, a habit I couldn't tolerate. Despite this, I always tried to be as selfless and dedicated as Jack wanted. But he never understood how much those comparisons hurt me. Each time he made them, I felt emptier. Today was no different. Jack came home earlier than usual, catching me off guard since I hadn't received any word from him about his early return. "Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't expecting you so soon. Dinner's not ready yet," I said, surprised. Jack let out a deep sigh, shot me a sideways glance, and handed me his jacket. "You really ought to learn a thing or two from your sister-in-law. You're so inconsiderate," he muttered before heading into the living room. He turned on the TV and slumped heavily onto the couch. I quickly brought him a beer and some snacks. If he was going to come home early, a heads up would have been nice. I felt a wave of frustration, but I knew better than to voice it. Jack sat in silence, drinking his beer and munching on snacks while glued to the TV. He never thanked me. He acted like it was my duty to serve him. Before we were married, Jack was my boss, always quick to scold me for any mistakes, but he never acknowledged his own. He's proud and constantly tries to impress his brother. It might sound like I'm painting him in a bad light, but he does have a kind side. I knew that side of him, so I tried to live up to his expectations. Tonight, Jack came home late. When I greeted him with "Welcome home" after 9 o'clock, he wordlessly dropped his clothes on the floor and headed straight to the bathroom. He must be exhausted from working overtime, I thought, as I prepared dinner for him to eat after his shower. Jack sat down at the table without a word, and the moment I set down his fork, he began eating. "You're home late today. You must be tired. Was it a busy day?" I asked, but he didn't respond. He finished his meal in about 10 minutes, had his usual evening drink, and went straight to the bedroom. He didn't say a word to me during that time. After making sure he was in bed, I sighed and started cleaning up. Once the dishes were done, I prepared his suit for work tomorrow. After checking everything, I took a bath and headed to bed myself. Jack was already asleep, so I quietly slipped into bed, careful not to wake him. Lately, this has become our routine. Jack barely listens to me and rarely responds. If I push him for a reply, he snaps, "Shut up," and becomes irritable. When he's in a bad mood, it lingers, and I feel suffocated even in my own home. But despite everything, I can't bring myself to dislike him. On his good days, we still share silly conversations like we used to, and he brings home desserts for us to enjoy together. On days like today, I tell myself he must just be in a bad mood, or maybe something went wrong at work. We've been married for over 20 years now, so maybe this is just the right amount of distance between us. But is it selfish of me to wish for those good times every day? One day, out of the blue, I received a call from my brother-in-law. It was unusual. He usually contacted my husband directly, so I couldn't help but wonder what was going on. Curious, I handed the house phone to my husband. "Hello, what's up, bro?" My husband greeted him, his tone lighter than usual as he launched into a cheerful conversation. In moments like these, my husband turns almost childlike. It's obvious how much he looks up to his brother. Not wanting to interrupt, I quietly went back to my housework. When my husband finished the call, I returned to take the phone from him. "So what was that about?" I asked. My husband simply replied, "Yeah." That was all he said. I assumed it wasn't anything serious, so I didn't push further and just put the phone back in its place. A few days later, I noticed my husband acting a bit secretive, preparing something in a way that made me curious. I hesitated to ask, so I just continued with my usual routine. As I went about my chores, I couldn't help but notice him hauling loads of stuff from the room to the backyard, sorting through what he needed and what he didn't. What had suddenly inspired him to start cleaning? I wondered as I finished my chores and took a little break. Then, out of nowhere, my husband stood in front of me. "What are you doing? Get moving already. You've seen me running around, right? Why aren't you helping?" "Huh?" I stared at him confused. He sighed heavily and muttered, "This is exactly why you're hopeless." I must have looked completely bewildered as he continued to grumble. "Why are you so clueless? You never understand anything. I keep telling you to be more like your sister-in-law. I shouldn't have to spell everything out for you. But if you don't tell me what's going on, I can't do anything," I replied. "Oh, come on. We talked about this. We're moving." I was stunned by his sudden declaration. I had no memory of any such conversation. Seeing my confusion, my husband began explaining in a frustrated tone. "Remember the call from my brother? He's retired now and living off his pension, which isn't easy. He was saying how paying rent feels like a waste. So we're giving him our house. This way, he won't have to pay any rent. How do you not get that?" I was floored by his selfishness. Normally, this is something we would discuss together, but my husband had gone ahead and made the decision all on his own. "I never agreed to this. Why should I give up our home?" I protested, my voice trembling with frustration. My husband barked back, "Quiet. No, I can't accept this. I don't want to give up our house. And besides, do you really think your brother and his wife would want this?" As our argument escalated, the doorbell suddenly rang. My husband gestured toward the door, silently telling me to answer it. Frustrated, I put our conversation on hold and rushed to the door. When I opened it, I was met with the sight of my brother-in-law and his wife. I invited them into the living room, where my husband greeted them with a smile and started explaining his outrageous plan. My brother-in-law seemed hesitant about the idea, but Linda was clearly excited. "Are you serious? I can't accept this." I objected, panicked, but my husband silenced me with a menacing glare. Overpowered by his stare, I fell quiet. Then my husband dropped a bombshell. "I'm giving our house to my brother. If you don't agree, we're getting divorced." Linda, with a smug grin, chimed in, "Yeah, you should just leave already." Their attitudes infuriated me, but instead of voicing my anger, I glared at them. Linda quickly became confrontational. "What's with that look? You're the wife. You should obey your husband, right? We're family. I think decisions like this should be made together. I just found out about this today, and I'm telling you, I don't agree with it." My husband responded with a cold stare. "Why am I being treated like this? I'm your wife, not your subordinate," I said, my dissatisfaction growing. "We are family, right? Just because I'm your wife doesn't mean I have to agree with everything," I continued, hoping for some understanding. But instead, he responded harshly. "Even though you're my family, you're still my wife. You need to obey me." Something inside me snapped at his words. "I've heard enough. Let's get divorced." My husband and his brother's family looked at me in shock. "You said it yourself, didn't you? If I don't obey, we'll get divorced." "Well, I'm not going to obey you, so let's get divorced." My husband stared at me, his eyes wide with fear, but I stood my ground. "I'll get the divorce papers. In the meantime, you can pack your belongings or do whatever you need to do." Without waiting for a response, I stormed out the door, got into the car, and drove off. I felt a mix of anger and resignation. After everything I had done for him, He chose to side with Linda over me. It was heartbreaking to think about, but he could do whatever he wanted. Tears streamed down my face as I drove. A few minutes later, I arrived home to find the house filled with boxes. My husband approached me as soon as I walked in. "All that's left is your stuff. Pack up everything, the kitchenware, the appliances. Do it yourself," he said. I handed him the filled-out divorce papers. He took them and began signing with a nearby pen. With a smug look, he shoved the papers back at me. "Now we're strangers. So when are you planning to move out?" "I don't need to leave since we're strangers now, but you should hurry up and go," I replied. My husband was stunned, staring at me in disbelief. "What are you talking about? We just agreed. You're leaving too," he said, raising his voice. At his words, my brother-in-law and Linda hurried over. I looked at all their faces and asked, "What are you talking about? I inherited this house." My husband's face went blank. "Huh. This is my grandparents' house. You said you wanted to live here because paying rent seemed wasteful, but it's my inheritance." Confused, my husband approached me and said, "What do you mean? I'm your husband. Shouldn't I automatically inherit it too?" "What kind of nonsense is that? You have no connection to my grandparents. Inheritance is given to those directly related. Since we have no children, it's my inheritance alone." I was stunned by his lack of understanding about inheritance. It was clear my husband had no grasp of basic concepts. "When I told you about the inheritance, you didn't pay a cent in property taxes because the house and land are in my name. Don't you remember?" My husband was visibly flustered and at a loss for words. Linda, however, was quick to speak up. "It's your fault for not explaining things clearly. A wife should support her husband. Trying to kick him out like this. What kind of person are you?" No matter what she said, the fact remained that the property is in my name. "How do you plan to transfer ownership when the name on the deed is different?" "That's why I said we needed to discuss this properly, but Jack never listened," I said, glaring at Linda. Feeling a mix of determination and apprehension, I steeled myself. Amidst the escalating tension, my brother-in-law suddenly raised his voice. "Jack, Linda, enough. Stop causing more trouble." The unexpected authority in his voice made both Jack and Linda stiffen in surprise. I was taken aback as well, feeling a wave of relief. After casting one last glare at Jack and Linda, my brother-in-law stepped forward. "Catherine, I'm sorry for my brother and his wife's behavior." With that, my brother-in-law pulled me into a hug. Linda, seeing this, shouted, "Stop it," and rushed forward. "Why are you apologizing? Jack said he would give us the house, so Catherine, as his wife, should just go along with it. There's no need for you to apologize." "Stop this nonsense. It's disgraceful to take the house away from Catherine. This house is in her name. She has the right to make decisions about it. Jack should be the one listening to her." With those firm words, my brother-in-law shot a stern look at my husband. Jack, startled, was left speechless. Threatening divorce without properly discussing it as a couple. "I'm ashamed to call you my brother. Who do you think you are?" My husband began to stammer, trying to justify his actions. "But, big brother, you always impose your ideas on Linda. I thought that's how a husband should behave, so I've been tough on my wife." "What are you talking about? Yes, I may indulge Linda sometimes, but I've never made major decisions on my own or forced her to obey. I always appreciate her support." After being reprimanded by my brother-in-law, my husband finally seemed to grasp the gravity of his actions. He hung his head in shame, his face pale, and then hesitantly turned his gaze toward me. "Could we put the divorce on hold and have a calm discussion?" he asked. I glared at him, unimpressed by his attempt at negotiation. "A calm discussion? What are you talking about? We've already made a decision. We're getting a divorce. You're leaving and I'm staying here. There's nothing more to discuss. I just need to know when you're moving out." My husband looked stunned by my response, and my brother-in-law shook his head in exasperation. Linda, standing beside him, was visibly shaken. After my brother-in-law and his wife left, I proceeded with filing for divorce. Despite my husband's attempts to cling to the house, my decision remained unchanged. I could no longer tolerate being with him. Once I realized this, any feelings of love or interest I had for him vanished, leaving me with only a deep sense of emptiness and reflection on what I had been enduring. Despite my husband's desperate attempts to reconcile, the rift between us was too significant to bridge. He eventually accepted my stance and moved out a week later, according to my brother-in-law. I learned that my husband had started living alone in an apartment. My brother-in-law frequently apologized for the trouble caused by his brother and expressed his desire for my happiness. He seemed to harbor some resentment toward his brother, and it was apparent that their relationship had become strained. I also heard that Linda had become notably subdued since the events. News of my divorce spread quickly at my husband's workplace, exposing his abusive behavior and harsh treatment towards me. As a result, he lost his standing in the company. As for me, I began searching for a job after the divorce. A friend helped me secure a full-time position, and I'm now enjoying a positive work environment. Living in a house filled with old memories has been a source of comfort, and I'm finding joy in this new chapter of my life.